Hi everyone, my name's Claire Agata from Scopism, and today I've got two guests joining me to talk about the recently launched SIAM Health Assessment. So we've got Simon and Michelle, who were the lead architects on the health assessment, and I'm going to start this webinar by asking them to introduce themselves. So Simon and Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
There we go. I get the hard part. The challenge with doing this is one of us tells a story, the other one goes, "Oh yeah, pretty similar, really." So we're both dinosaurs, essentially. I say that in the nicest possible way, but from a service management point of view, we've both been in the industry a long time and been very familiar with service management principles right back to the early days. Certainly Simon for version 1. I can't make that claim. I'm more of a version 2 girl, but I certainly have been involved in service integration for a long time, back in the sort of early 2000s when it became a thing within the UK. I was working overseas, mostly on transition projects in India, and we didn't call it SIAM then. We called it multi-supplier integration, but the concept theory behind it was still the same sort of idea. So that's sort of my backstory. More latterly, I work in Australia at Kinetic IT. Simon is my colleague, and we work in the service management space generally. So we're invested in service management, whether that be, talking about agile and DevOps, but also, I guess, really focused on service integration because it's a real story for our customers. And certainly something that we feel quite passionate about. So we've been working with Claire and Scopism in the development of the bodies of knowledge, and then, of course, more latterly, a little bit around the space in the SIAM Health Assessment. So that's a bit about me.
Cool, and I'm Simon, and what she said. I guess as a dinosaur working with ITIL, so I've got a Dutch background. I used to work for Pink Elephant in the 90s, which is an awful long time ago, but I've now been in Australia for over 20 years. As a dinosaur around ITIL, or an ITIL zealot, which I put myself on Twitter, I always thought you didn't need anything else. Everything else was just repackaging. So I didn't kind of subscribe to the idea that we needed SIAM until we started thinking about it with the Foundation Architect group back in 2016 about there's a lot of things that are missing in Agile, in ITIL, and in some of the other methodologies and practices out there. And so I got really interested in the structural aspect of SIAM, and then developing through the foundation and professional body of knowledge, everything that comes with it from a cultural, from a people side, all those things that I'm not sure whether overlooked is the right word, but a lot of practices kind of almost took for granted. And it was great to see that being accepted and acknowledged on a global scale. And it's great to have, through Scopism, kind of a global community where we can develop things like the SIAM Health Assessment.
Fantastic, thank you both. And as you said, SIAM's evolved, I guess, as the way we work has evolved, and as our IT supply network becomes more complex. So we've collaborated together under the Scopism umbrella to create the foundation body of knowledge, the professional body of knowledge, and share those with the community. But where did then the idea for the health assessment come from? What sparked the initiation of this project?
Well, I guess it's simmered for a while, because traditionally in service management, there was the ITIL process self-assessment, which was version 2, which was, of course, very process-focused. And even with ITIL version 3, we still looked at processes. So Michelle and I already looked at, if you're looking at an organization, there's more than processes. And we even had an idea for a while to create a Kinetic IT capability assessment, or a KitKat, which never really eventuated. And then all of a sudden, we were kindly faced with a service integrated transition to one of our customers. And we were asked, can you do an assessment in 2 weeks from now? So we just kind of scrambled and looked at what was out there, what could we use, and we put a few things together. And I think the result was reasonable, acceptable, or actually quite beneficial, but it just felt like we need to have something that supports that broad approach from service integration across the different layers, across the different practices. And that was kind of the genius of the idea, like, let's do something with it. Let's put something in the market that looks at service integration beyond a process assessment.
I think he's pretty much covered it, really. There's not much for me to add there. Other than that, I guess the benefit of the backstory was that we had an opportunity to really think about how that would work within a customer space. So that was a really good starting point. So we knew the things that we had to look at, and we knew the things that were relevant to SIAM, and certainly that extended way past process activity, where a lot of the assessments I think that are out there today really do focus on those kind of things. So, you know, Simon's saying that the backstory was bigger, and I think with the benefit of the context of a real life customer organisation trying to work their way through the challenges, and how do we create this SIAM ecosystem, gave us an opportunity to think about, we've got to be really holistic about this and make sure we cover all those bases.
Yeah. I also think it really kind of identified a particular use case, and then we've expanded that, and there's some information about other times where you use the assessment. But as an external service integrator, when we come into a new customer, we need to know what is there, what isn't there. We need to know what they want, what the priorities are, and having something that is repeatable, that has a global anchoring into the theory is just so much easier for both parties, because you may not know each other. So there was a clear use case where we thought, well, this has got to happen more often for us as an organisation, but it's possibly going to happen all over the world on many occasions. And that's alone from other use cases where internal organisations just want to create a health assessment about, okay, where are we and where is the opportunity to improve?
Yeah, and what we're hoping here from the Scopism perspective as well is we can start to build some patterns as well. So seeing a kind of a global picture of SIAM maturity as that data starts to grow. So one of the things that I think collectively we're all very proud of at Scopism is the fact that everything we've done has been very collaborative, very inclusive, and the health assessment was no different as a project. You worked with a really diverse team. How did you start by putting the team together?
Again, that was a bit of a no-brainer, as you've alluded to, Claire. We've had the benefit of working with the codification and creation of the SIAM bodies of knowledge, both foundation and professional level, with some really incredible people. And they're incredible for all kinds of different reasons. You know, we've talked about their volunteer capacity, but they're practitioners, real world practitioners. And so we have, under your steerage, the opportunity to engage with people all over the world. And a lot of those that, you know, we get the backstory of understanding their position within the SIAM space in terms of their expertise. And I guess it's given us a great opportunity to get a whole group of people together where we've built a trust relationship, but also we've got clarity on their level of engagement, enthusiasm, expertise. So I think that was absolutely a starting point. The other thing that was really important around this space was making sure that it was very much a global development, because what we wanted to be clear about is making sure that it was something that was translatable to practitioners in their various guises across the globe. So we had the opportunity to go back to the authors that had helped with the bodies of knowledge, and based on understanding their expertise, we could work through and say, okay, when we build this is where we think we need people in different areas, mindful of the fact that we knew where all that expertise was, and we knew that it was a willing and capable group of people. So I guess that was the joy really for us, was that previous experience. Now, we did add to that group of people because, of course, practitioners have developed over a period of time and relationships have formed and so on. But that was essentially a really good starting point. So there's a million names that we could shout out, and you know, we certainly some key players like Daniel Breston, and Steve Morgan, Matthew Burrows. I mean, the list goes on in terms of the kinds of people. I'm certainly not discounting anybody that was there, because they were all really fantastic contributors. And that's the great thing with this journey, is that what we found is that we don't get people who are in it just to get their name on the top of a document or a part of a development. These are people who are massively passionate about sharing their experience and knowledge to the community. So it was an easy ask for us, really, to go out there based on those previous relationships and be able to handpick essentially the best people in the world to do that job.
Yeah, I think that's good. We did do some handpicking where we just asked some of the people that we worked with before to join us. We looked also at the different capabilities and experiences of people. So Michelle mentioned some names, and again, if I don't mention any names, they still contributed. But Matthew Burrows brought his wealth of Sophia knowledge into it. We had For Me with a number of people joining us. We've had people from commercial service integrators like Kinetic IT and TCS bringing their experience in there. We've had people like Daniel Breston being a consultant in service management, even longer than us. I don't know what was before the dinosaurs, but would have been there. And they all had different opinions about assessments, about maturities, about what to look for. We had people looking from governance areas. And it was just great to see how it all kind of gelled together. And it's always been an amazing experience with the bodies of knowledge. And it really makes this SIAM Health Assessment generic from a global perspective. It's not Kinetic IT's or Simon's or Michelle's point of view on how an assessment should be. It really is an outcome of a whole group of experts from around the world.
And I think that's so important. If it is that narrow focus, it does quite often tend to be restricted to a particular geography or a particular sector, and kind of looking at the data for the people who are coming and doing the health assessment online. I can already see we've had people from South America, Asia, Europe, Africa. So having that global group creating a global assessment, I think is essential. But you kind of mentioned there, you get a diverse group, you will obviously have diverse opinions, and we all know sometimes that can give a few challenges. Were there some sort of topics in the group that caused more debate than others?
There were lots of topics that caused lots of debate. I think it's a healthy discussion, and I think that's the basis. That there's the group of people that were working together had a trust relationship and experience in some regards with working with each other, so we could have those really robust conversations about what we wanted to achieve and what we didn't want to achieve. So early doors, we had, for example, myself and Daniel Breston being a little bit we're not sure about this assessment stuff. It's a little bit old school, and this is all about aspiration for a number, and and does that speak to modern service management? So we had those we put those conversations out there to make sure that that perspective was well understood. And then, of course, we could have proper discussions about, well, that's not what we're going to create here. We're actually looking for something else. So there was heated debates about words like maturity, for example, which was completely banished within the context of what we were trying to achieve. And we went through that idea of trying to create something with a focus on improvement. And that's where we pretty much arrived at the health analogy. And we've used that as a bit of an anchoring point, really, in terms of building the maturity. Look, I'm saying it. The health assessment. Stop myself. The health assessment. So I guess that was one of the key starting points. It was, let's make this about improvement. So health is key. Let's make sure that it's something that actually makes sense in a modern service environment. And let's ensure that we don't build something that sets people up to aspire for a number, because actually that makes no sense in terms of what we're trying to do, which is create a picture of a SIAM ecosystem and this aspirational future state, and try to fill in the gaps in terms of what that might look like.
I think with that, and it wasn't really a debate, but yeah, no maturity, no benchmark, but a number was kind of unavoidable in terms of the outputs and the creation in there. But from an early start, we decided that with the number needs to be guidance about where to go next, and it needs to be realistic. So, for instance, and that was a debate, traditionally there are 5 levels of maturity, which is a banned word in there that you find in most assessments out there. And we kind of said, well, level 5 is kind of, that's nirvana. It's so hard to achieve. And if you've achieved it today, it's gone tomorrow because the world is constantly changing, but it's not very realistic. Our experience is that most people are in that bottom half in there. So why don't we focus on levels 1, 2, and 3 only, and I'm not saying only, because that's where improvements can be made. That's where we can provide some real guidance in saying, okay, you are at level 2, where do you go from here? And ultimately, maybe you reach level 5, who knows, but the improvements should focus on that area where we can give still global and generic advice on that. So that was a bit of a debate. Should we stick with the 5 levels or not in there? We then decided to add the half levels from a granularity point of view in there. And that then, okay, where do you stop? So do we stop at half levels? Are we going to have pluses and minuses and things like that? And we had to kind of draw the line at some point and saying, oh, it's not about the numbers. So whether it's a 1.5 or a 1.7 or a 1.8 is really not the point. The point is, how do you go from there to the next step in there? So yeah, lovely debate about what is what level indicates what, and how do we present it to organizations in there who maybe still want a number, but how can we convey that improvement aspect around it?
Yeah, that I mean, we all know people who are just chasing the number. You know, we were 2 last year, we have to be 3 this year, but in order, you have to put them on a scale somewhere in order to show where they are now.
I have an example where I was asked to do a process assessment. This was way pre-SIAM in there. And I got asked all the time, like, it's level 2, isn't it? It's level 2, isn't it? And I was kind of saying, well, level 2 isn't that great. It's okay, but isn't that great? But it turned out, in hindsight, that level 2 was in a project and in terms of a personal bonus, level 2 needed to be achieved, almost regardless of what that indicated and how to go from there to something that is more acceptable. And unfortunately, that does happen. So no maturity, no benchmark. The health analogy saying it doesn't matter whether you're an Olympic athlete or whether you're an 80-year-old or whether you've just been in hospital, you go to the doctor to get an assessment about your health, and if there's something that can be improved, you get that advice to go from there, and that'll be different, but you're not comparing the 80-year-old to the Olympic athlete.
That's a nice way to look at it, I think. So we've touched on the kind of the levels of granularity and the fact that sometimes it's people like yourself carrying out these assessments, but we also have the online version as well. Explain to us a little bit about how the assessment's structured and the 2 different versions.
Yeah, so as you've alluded to, Claire, there's a free online version, and you know, I think that's always been the Scopism ethos, that this is not just crowdsourced by way of a solution, but it's widely available for people to utilise, and that was the nature with the box, and something that we're really passionate about, and certainly Scopism is passionate about. So we've got this online version which is accessible, and you can, I'm sure Claire will share links at the end, and that gives you the full capability in terms of depth of questions within the assessment. So that is available for anybody really to download and have a go at. The next version or iteration of that is really the scope of the consultant's version. Now, it's not that the questions are any different, but the analysis and the granularity that's available with that is, as Simon alluded to before, it builds in half levels, which helps you to get a bit more of an understanding of the detail associated with what the transition between those levels might look like. Now, one of the things that we always say is, with a degree of caution, it's available for people to download and use, and we would absolutely encourage that. But I think what makes the consultant taking you on that journey means that they really get the opportunity to tell the story better, because they've got a really great understanding of the bodies of knowledge and what the best practice says in this space, and they can explain some of the terminology and I guess show people, the like for like. So, for example, if we were talking about SIAM governance framework, what might that look like in your organisation, and what are those transferable or relatable attributes that we would look at and consider as being within the scope of the assessment. So, I guess the message is that the assessment is the same, but what is different is the benefit of having the consultant is the opportunity to get much more of an understanding and to drill into the details and ask in-depth questions based on an understanding of SIAM as a best practice, but also based on a really good understanding of how the structure of the assessment flows and runs, and how best to not to manipulate, but I guess to engineer and put the logistics behind making that work in the best possible way.
Yeah, and I guess it's always been like, can I do it myself? Do I have to get someone else to do it for me? And we kind of didn't want to choose. We wanted to make sure everything was available. But the assessment is based on the theory and the bodies of knowledge, and the bodies of knowledge are freely available, but they're big books and they need to be read, they need to be interpreted. So we found in the soft launch that, sometimes the question is clear from a SIAM perspective, but not everyone will completely understand how a SIAM governance framework is different from a corporate governance framework. So the question could be, have you got a SIAM governance framework? And they go, well, I've got a governance framework, so should I answer yes or no, or whatever is in there? So that's where the consultant-led version comes in through the licensed consulting group in there. These are the people that have not only understand the SIAM theory, but have practical experience. And that can take the assessment to the next step, where not only do you get the results and the generic guidelines and guidance from the body of knowledge, but something that then can be tailored and prioritized. Say, okay, well, we've got these 5 topics that we should look at, but this is the most important one for your organization. This is where we can go. So the online assessment is there. It's relatively straightforward. We try to keep it simpler without those half levels, and it can give you a good indication, especially if you do the assessment on a frequent basis. But if you're new to SIAM, if you're in those early days, then the consultant assessment, or if you want an independent, the consultant assessment can do that added value on top of that to really kind of drill into it. And there is kind of a third assessment available, which isn't really there, but that's where the consultant can add their own speciality. So as an example, Kinetic IT has developed an operating model for the service integrator called MAID, and we've got a white paper out on that. But we could do the assessment and then add kind of MAID-specific questions around it and start working on how the MAID model would work for you. Or Matthew Burrows that we mentioned, or other people may add Sophia elements in there, or the 4Me people, or Steve Morgan might look for the tool specifically and look at tool integration and automation around it. So you have the self-assessment, which is kind of at the base level, then the consultant value add, and then there is kind of things you can bolt on to the assessment to make it even more specific to your organization and the issues that you are trying to face there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice way of explaining it, because even sometimes doing the online self-assessment might trigger an organisation to think, actually, I could do with some specialised support here. So if for anybody watching this, if you go to the Scopism website, you'll see the assessment section, and then in there you'll see the free online version, and you'll also see the licensed consultants who can help guide you through this. And many of the licensed consultants were actually contributors to the development of the assessment as well. So they've got that real kind of in-depth expertise, and as Simon mentioned there, they can add their own special flavour, whatever that might be, whether it's automation, whether it's people, they can add that experience as well, which is what you'd always hope to get from a consultant. So one question I wanted to ask you is, what's the thing that you're most proud of in terms of the development of the assessment?
Well, I think it was mentioned before, the fact that this is done by, I can't remember the number, between 30 and 40, I think we are people from around the world with different backgrounds, different IDs, sometimes very strong IDs in there. And we've managed to create something that kind of is the best of all of those people put together. So it's a real collaborative approach, which like I don't know, I think I said it or someone else, it's better than what anyone could create it on their own. And I'm very proud of that, or we are very proud, similar as what we've done with the bodies of knowledge. The other thing is that it's more than what was available. Who knows what's going to be available soon there. So what we talked about, the different levels, it is free, but you can have added value to it. We are looking at more than just processes. We're looking at culture and people, which is much harder to assess, but it's very important to have. And one of the things which kind of also sits in the previous discussion on structure, we haven't used yes or no questions because some things are black and white. And do you have a dog is a yes or no question, but do you walk your dog every day is well, yeah, most days I do it. Those are the kind of answers we often get in organizations. And the assessment really is trying to look at those gray areas to give you a much better indication of where you are. Because if you walk your dog most days, it's not a yes, but you're very close. If you hardly ever walk the dog, it's not a no, but you're still a bit way off from the yes in there. So that, I think, is a really good achievement for the assessment to give you that indication at a granular level other than just black and white.
Yeah, I think the structure, as Simon says, is something that we are massively proud of because it wasn't a straightforward thing. That a lot of effort went into making sure that if we were at the point where we had a fairly immature organisation, we wouldn't be ploughing them through a load of questions. So that's really good, and I guess as well the level of detail within the questioning as well was a key thing that I think has been done exceptionally well. So kudos to everybody involved. The other thing for me, and again, it goes back to the conversation of, the message that I mentioned before, there were, a few of us very vocal on making sure that we didn't create something that was trying to template an approach or mandate a certain thing, because, in modern service environments, that doesn't make any sense. We always talk about best practice being something that's guidance and you really have to look at it within the context of an organization, its culture, its values, its strategy, its plans, and so on. But I think sometimes what happens with these assessments and this drive for numbers, that can get lost. I think what we've managed to achieve here is, despite the fact that you can create a number, I think the guidance gives you that opportunity to really get a lot more of an understanding and an ability to be able to take the recommendations and apply them within the context of an organisation. So it's not a mandate, it's not a template. And I think, the added opportunity of being able to then take from that your focus areas. So, for example, if we identify that governance is a weaker area, or your tooling strategy is a weaker area, the benefit of them being able to do that exploration in much more detail, especially if you use a consultant, to say, okay, so how do we develop this out a little bit more? What would that look like? So that is one of the things I guess I'm really proud of as a group. I think that was something we've achieved really quite nicely, and something I was really keen to make sure that we didn't end up with something that was numbers focused, was almost like, as I say, a template, a mandate, because that wasn't what the intention or the purpose was right from the outset, and we got there.
Yeah, and I think the sort of the SIAM community in general should be very grateful to you for your effort, because you're doing this around full-time jobs, and for your leadership as well, because it would have been really easy to say, we've developed this, and it's a Kinetic IT assessment, but what you've done is created something that is now available across the SIAM community, and that's a huge thing that you should be proud of as well. So one last question before we wrap up. You've run the assessment a few times now. Part of it is the soft launch, and perhaps with some of your clients. Is there anything that you found that's maybe surprised you a little bit?
It's really easy. It surprises because of the. I mean, yes, it's not as easy as maybe it sounds, but if you have the SIAM experience around it, getting through the questions. So there's 5 practices with 4 topics and roughly 4 to 5 questions in there. It doesn't actually take all that long to do the assessment, and then it auto-generates a report. It does that online and for the consultant. So that part is so easy to do. Admittedly, the real work then begins in interpreting those results and coming up with recommendations that are tailored for the organization. But doing the assessment is a really easy thing. So there's basically no excuse to do this on a regular basis, because there's no point at going to the doctor for a health assessment and then just not listening to any of the benefits and then the improvements, and just go again a year later and find out that nothing has changed in there. So it is a really good starting point. It is a really low threshold for organizations, free online, but even with a consultant, and then there's a limited impact there to do it. And I think that's a really good finding. I wasn't actually thinking it would be kind of this easy.
Yeah, I think to add to that as well, the structure of the assessment lends itself to opportunities to have really in-depth conversations with different stakeholders within your SIAM ecosystem. So, for example, you can, the way that the assessment is built, you can slice off, governance and strategy and make sure that you've got the relevant stakeholder group to ask questions in there. You can look at tooling and have a different audience. You can look at the process, and again, naturally, it would be different people that you would have conversations with. So you can slice and dice it, and you can do it in lots and lots of different ways, and really then get the opportunity and the benefit to have really good conversations with the right people. So that for me is something that we have found has been great. It's very adaptable, and you can sort of slice and dice it. And the other thing I alluded to before, one of the things that has naturally happened as a result is that when we start to generate the data around, okay, so how did they go, we're able to have much better conversations in the areas where there is, really relevant, serious weaknesses and things that we should really put some effort into. And that transition from getting that data from the assessment and the radar chart and so on gives us that opportunity to really start those conversations with confidence that we've got this really great picture of what's going on. So I think it's flexible, it's scalable, you can do it in so many different ways, and I think that is a major positive.
Yeah, and if I can just add on what Michelle says, that as a conclusion in there, the way we position the assessment is it's a conversation starter. It's not a goal to do the assessment, it's to start the conversation with the organization. What can we improve? What do we focus on in there? And it's a really good tool in that regard. It looks at tooling people, all the different aspects around it, and hopefully it will start those conversations about SIAM, whether you're at the beginning and you're still figuring out what it is and what you need to do, whether you're further down the road and you're looking for, okay, how can I improve from where I am? And start the conversation, do the assessment, look at the radar chart, and then look at how to move from there.
Yeah, and I think a really important point there as well is, just as the assessment would have had less value if it had been 1 or 2 people writing it, there's also less value if it's just one person taking it. And I think Michelle's point there about bringing in a whole range of people from the organisation is actually a really important one to finish on. So thank you both for that. So the survey can be accessed on the Scopus website. If you look for the assessment section, you'll find in there the link to the free online health assessment, which is all fully automated. You'll find a link to the consultants who can guide you through the assessment, and absolutely would recommend that there. expertise and their SIAM knowledge is just vast, and I think what you'll get from the recommendations there, it really can't be underestimated. The author group, including Simon and Michelle, have also been very prolific in writing blogs and extra content to explain more about the survey and the different sections of the survey. So if you look in the blog section on the Scopus website, you'll find a lot of information there as well. Yeah, I guess that's it from me. The health assessment is there on the Scopus website, developed in collaboration with Kinetic IT. Simon, Michelle, I don't know if you want to point people to where they can access more of your white papers as well.
They're on the Kinetic IT website, so kineticit.com.au, or Google Kinetic IT, or if you can find our details through the Scopus website and contact us. We're always happy to help people. I think, again, there are a lot of people in this group very passionate about service integration and making sure it benefits organizations. So always happy to help out.
Fantastic, thank you. And we are, with the free online health assessment, absolutely your data is safe. If you're filling that in, we're not using that to spam people, but what we are looking at is where people are coming from. We're looking at levels of maturity. So you'll see in the next 12 months, we'll start to share some information about trends and the things that we're seeing from the results as well. So massive thank you to you, Simon and Michelle, for being with us today. Really appreciate it, and everything that you do for the SIAM community as well. It's a pleasure to collaborate with you, and really looking forward to seeing how the assessment evolves. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Claire.